Good morning, second grade. Ferber and I are going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, a long time ago, in the kingdom of the world was a king, the king of sadness. And what the king of sadness loved to do was to go around in his kingdom and to see how unhappy everyone was. For a sad person loves nothing more than to find other people who are sad. It makes them a little happier or sadder. Well, one day, this king of sadness, who was in disguise, went around to see how unhappy his kingdom was. And as he was going around through the day, he noticed people weren't smiling, people looked bored, people just were walking around in miserable ways, saying unkind things to one another. And he was feeling very good about this. Until at the end, as he was ready to go back to his palace, he heard some music. He followed the music. Music was not something the king of sadness liked to hear, especially this kind of music. And he followed it, and he came to a broken house. And on at the broken house, there was a broken porch. And there, sitting at a broken table on a broken chair, was a man playing a guitar. And he was happy. He was smiling. And there's a few little crumbs on his plate. And the king of sadness went up and said, "What are you doing? Who are you? I'd ask you who you were, but I know who you are." "You don't know who I am? I am the great fixer," said the man. "I go through towns and I say, I am the great fixer. I can fix your lives. I can fix broken hearts. I can fix anything you need just for a few pennies. That's all I need for a meal. For I will make that meal a feast." Now, the king of sadness knows that people always have food, and all throughout his kingdom, these sad people can eat, and they can eat a lot. But they don't have feasts. A feast is when you chew every morsel of food and you thank the Creator. And when you do that, you can't help but be happy. And this the king of sadness did not want. And he said, "Oh, so you fix things." "That's right, I fix things. I'm the great fixer. That's why they call me the great fixer, because I fix things." "Ah," said the king in disguise. "Very well. All right, have a nice evening." And he went. And so the next day, when the great fixer went out to the streets, he started calling, "I am the great fixer. I can fix it." And people opened up their windows, their shutters, and said, "Shh! Did you not hear? The king has decreed there shall be no fixing." "What? No fixing, no fixing." They closed the shutters. What is this? And as he was walking around, he saw there was a gentleman, and he was chopping some wood. And he went up to the gentleman and he said, "Excuse me, sir. Here you are, a fine gentleman chopping wood. Let me do it." "All right," said the gentleman. "Here, take the axe. Be my guest." And so he chopped wood. And he gave him a few pennies afterwards. And so when the king was going around, he wanted to see what the great fixer was up. So he disguised himself again as a schlepper. Now, a schlepper is someone who carries things, a porter who carries things as a poor person. And so the king, as a disguised as a schlepper, went to the broken house with the broken porch and the broken chair and the broken table, and he saw the great fixer, and he's playing guitar. He was smiling, and he had a plate there. And he said, "So, hi, I notice you're happy." "Why shouldn't I be happy?" said the great fixer. "I just had a great feast." "Ah," said the king, disguised as a schlepper. "So how did you get your money to have a feast?" "Ah, it's crazy. I tell you, this king at this place, He's mashugana. He's crazy. He says there's no more fixing. But luckily I came across a man who was chopping wood, so I offered to chop wood, and he gave me some pennies. And so I had a feast. Ah, and it was a feast. Ah, said the king to himself. Very good. And off he went. Well, the next day the great fixer went to the man who had all this wood to cut. And he said, "Hi, I'm here to help you chop some wood." "Oh, I'm sorry," said the man. "The king says no more chopping in the kingdom. No more chopping of wood." "What?" "I know, it's crazy. But that's what it is." "All right." And so he was walking around, and he saw this lady on her porch. And she was dressed in this beautiful dress. And he said, "Oh, lovely lady, who are you? To be dressed, to be sweeping in a beautiful dress like that. Let me help you." She goes, "Oh, thank you. My maid left." He goes, "Ah, sure." And he swept up her porch and the house, and she gave him some pennies. And when the king went out into the skies again as a schlepper, he went to see how the fixer was doing. And there he heard the music, and there the broken house and the broken porch and the broken chair, the broken table. There was the fixer. He was smiling and playing along. He said, "Ah, you are happy again." "Of course I'm happy again. I had a feast." "How did you get the money?" "Well, there was this lady. After I found out this crazy king said that there's no more chopping of wood, I found this lady, and I helped her sweep." Oh. And the king got an idea. And what do you think? He made a decree, no more sweeping. So he couldn't sweep. And then he found something else. He said, and no more peeling potatoes, no more gardening, no more taking care of cats, right, Ferber? All these things. Whatever the fixer had figured out doing, the next day there was no more this, until finally there was no more anything. Well, the great fixer one morning said, "Well, there's nothing I can do now except join the army." And so he went to the army. Now the army in this time, they would only pay a soldier twice a year. But that wouldn't help the great fixer have his feast. And so he went to the general and said, "I would like to join your army." "Very good," said the general, because, there's always wars to fight when you have a king who's sad, right? So you have that. But the conscription of finding enough soldiers was really bad. So he was like, "Oh yeah, come." He goes, "But I have a need." "And what is that?" says the general. "That instead of paying me twice a year, just give me a few pennies each day." "Very good. Talk to the quartermaster." And so it was arranged. The general had him gave him his sword and his uniform, and that day he walked around looking mean. He never felt mean, but he was looking mean, and slashing his sword, looking like he was a great warrior. And so he looked like he was a good actor. So he was good. So he was going around like that, and at the end he went to the quartermaster and said, "I would like my food. I like my money." And so he was given the money, and he got some food, and he's playing along, of course, at his place, and the king in disguise came and said, "Ah, you're happy." "Of course I'm happy. I have a feast." "But I tell you, it wasn't easy." "So how did you do it?" said the king. Well, the king, who was crazy, he can't do anything. He can't do anything in this kingdom. So I went into the military. He went into the military, but they only give you money 6 months, every 6 months. How do you have food? How do you have money? "Ah, I made a deal. Just give me a few pennies a night." "Ah," said the king. And so he left. The next day he went to the general and said, "You cannot have people being paid nightly, only every 6 months." And so when the great fixer went to report to duty with his sword and got his sword and all that, the general said, "You may not be fed, you may not be given money every night." Oh. every 6 months. Oh. So after he was walking around pretending to be mean and pretending to fight, making sure he didn't hurt anybody, he was walking home and he came across a pawn shop. Now for you chess players, you might think a pawn shop is a place where they sell little pawns and stuff like that, but it's not like that. A pawn shop, and they still have them today, is when you have something and you usually are desperate for money. You go to a pawn shop, you said, I have this, in his case, a sword. And he said, I will give you this sword, give me some money for it. And then in a pawn shop, if you have enough money, at some point you can buy it back. But after a certain time, if you don't buy it back, they can sell it. So that's how it works. And so for giving his sword, he got some money. Enough for a year's worth of food. And as he was walking by, as he was going back, he thought of something. I need to have something that looks like a sword. So he bought some silver paper, and he bought some cardboard, and he made it look like a silver sword out of cardboard and silver wrap. I think you've probably done that before. And he went home, and he had a feast. Now the king, out in disguise, he heard the music, and at the broken house and the broken porch and the broken table and the broken chair, there was the fixer, the great fixer. And he was smiling, playing along. He said, how did you get some food? I tell you, it wasn't easy. But this time, I went to the pawn shop and I gave my sword, and now I have enough money for a year's worth. Aha, thought the king. I have him now. For in the kingdom, it was a death sentence for a soldier to give up his sword. And the king, disguised as a shepherd, said, that's very good. And off he went. Well, the next day, the king went to the prison. Now, if you have an unhappy kingdom, you're going to have a big unhappy prison system and lots of prisoners who are unhappily in prison. And he went to the warden and said, are there any prisoners condemned to die today? And the warden said, yes, we have this one in cell block C. Very good, bring him out. And so they brought out the prisoner to the great courtyard. And the king had called forth all the soldiers of the land to stand in formation. And there he was, the king, in his best liveries, his best uniform, looking very kingly, and said, this prisoner is condemned to die. I am going to choose one of you soldiers to run him through with his sword. And he looked, and there he recognized the great fixer with his uniform and his sword. You, come here. What, me? Said the great fixer. You want me? What do I need? You are to run through this guilty man with your sword. You want me to kill him? I have never killed anybody in my life. I am not planning on killing anybody, and I'm not starting today. The king's face turned red like a tomato. You dare to refuse your king? I'm not going to kill anybody. Then you shall die. Now the great fixer is good at fixing things, and this is a situation that he needed to fix, and quite soon. All right. And he turned to address all the soldiers. Now all of you know me as the great fixer. I have come through towns, and I have fixed broken hearts and fixed broken lives and fixed all your things that are broken. So I know something about magic. And I know this, that if this man is guilty, then my sword here shall run him through. But if he is innocent, my sword shall turn into nothing but silver paper. And so all the soldiers, everybody leaned forward. Prepare to meet your fate, he said to the prisoner. The prisoner's eyes were wide, and he drew his sword, which shone with great light off the sunlight, and to the stomach of the prisoner he went. Of course, you know what happened. It just broke apart into the silver paper of which it was. The crowd of soldiers erupted in this great big cheer, and everybody got and they lifted up the great fixer upon their shoulders. And after that, the king left that kingdom, for the kingdom was no longer sad. And for the great fixer that night, oh, did he have a feast. So I hope you enjoyed that story. And I hope when you next time you have your meal, that you will savor every morsel so that your meal shall turn into a feast.